being kind and understanding that they're people, but also being able to manage holding folks accountable. That was not an easy thing for me at first. You want to be able to say, okay, like I'm likable. They want to work for me. You had mentioned it. People leave because of leadership, and I didn't want any of that to happen. But if you're not holding folks accountable, if you're not setting the expectations, their performance isn't going to be there, and they're going to walk out the door anyway.
At Elements of Culture, we sit down with experts in leadership and team building to explore the DNA that drives a thriving organization. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elements of Culture. My name is Taryn, and I'm joined with my co-host, Julie. And today we are so excited to have Evan Hall with us from Bottomline. He's the VP of Vendor Sales there at Bottomline, and you're based out of, our company's based out of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Excited to have this conversation. Of course, on Elements of Culture, we talk a lot about sales and leadership and all those good topics. And I know, Evan, you've got certainly some thoughts and things you want to weigh in around the leadership discussion. But before we get to those topics, do you mind to share with us, like, what's your journey been? What has really kind of brought you to where you're at today?
Sure. Thanks, Taryn. Excited to be here today. I've been with Bottomline for just over 9 years. It's kind of crazy to think that it's been 9 years already. I started out as a high school guidance counselor, so I was not in corporate America or working in business, and decided to make a change. I was extremely fortunate that I had a couple of really great friends from college that worked at Bottomline at the time, and helped me break into the company and the corporate world. Started on member services and really worked my way up. Never in a million years thought I'd be in sales or that I'd be any good at it. And here I am 9 years later leading our strategic accounts team.
Nobody plans to be in sales. Isn't that interesting? Like no one.
Every time they're like, I don't know how I got here. It just kind of happened.
Yeah, that's right. It's my favorite interview question, actually. I'll always ask, how did you get into sales and why is it something you want to continue to pursue? I always find that it's pretty rare that someone is like, well, I decided in middle school that I was going to be a salesperson, and, here I am following that dream.
No, I actually haven't heard anybody. There might have been one person we interviewed that said they planned on going into sales. But other than that, I don't know that anybody did.
No, it's just the one guy because he's like, my mom and dad were in sales. And so inevitably I ended up in sales at, 16 years old.
It
So,
goes.
yeah. So Evan, you were a guidance counselor. What was the shift? What was the shift that you just decided you needed a different path?
I think it'll end up tying into some of the things we'll talk about leadership. But one of my favorite things to do as a guidance counselor, I was in the high school age range, was career planning and what does life look like after high school. But what I didn't really fully understand is that such a small portion of the school year, and you are really only helping a very small portion of the kids that are under your tutelage. And so I decided that I needed to make a shift where I could spend more time, helping people pursue those things and understand, what are their goals and what makes them tick. And that's where I ended up making the shift over to Bottomline. Not having had any corporate experience, I really didn't know where to start or what to do. And honestly, member services was a great place to get a foundation because you're interacting with your customers every single day. It's not always the most pleasant conversation. They're frustrated or they're trying to solve a challenge or a problem. And so without realizing it, I was already working on my sales chops when I was with the member services team. But it was a great place to be. And then again, through those same friends that introduced me to Bottomline, they just sort of helped spread the word to a few other leaders within the business, and was able to make the move over to the vendor sales team and sort of make my way from there.
So, Evan, Bottomline is a financial tech kind of B2B payment system, correct? Tell us a little bit about what Bottomline offers, just to give a little more context.
Yeah, great question. Bottomline is a fintech company. They have several different products or lines of business. I support Paymode, which is actually the US's largest B2B payments network. And so we really help businesses pay and get paid, really focused on fraud prevention, making sure that those payments can get to where they're supposed to get to safely, but then ease of use and making sure that we're really keying in on what are AP and AR departments' biggest challenges, pains, and needs. It's around automating their process, making lives easier, reducing risk, reducing costs, driving revenue, those kinds of things.
Gotcha. So that helps kind of paint a better picture just to understand. So it's really about, so I imagine there's a lot of tech involved in payment. There's certainly, some privacy and different things that needs to be part of that. In your 9 years, I know you said you didn't have other corporate experience coming into this role with Bottomline, but how have things changed over 9 years and watching, your systems, the way you communicate with your clients, your team? What has changed?
A lot has changed. The pandemic put, I think, a huge wrench into payments. There were a tremendous amount of paper payments that were still happening at that time. And obviously, everything came to a halt, just like it impacted just about everything else in the world. It certainly impacted our business as well. But the thing that I think I'm most proud of is the size of our network. When I started here, we were about 150,000 members. We're now over 600,000 members. So it's grown quite a bit in that time frame. We've been through an acquisition. We've seen our revenue explode. Our team size when I started on vendor sales was about 20 people total, including leadership. We're now over 120 people. And so we're a really big sales force. And those are some of the big changes that we've seen from our side. But honestly, it's that it's become a much more common and frequent thing to hear from people that they want digital payments. Back then you still had people that wanted to go down to the bank and get in line and grab the lollipop and meet their teller that they see every week and deposit those checks, and it was just part of their routine. And nowadays, people are so adverse to check payments. They want to see those payments come in more safely and securely. They want to get their money in the door faster. With the uncertainty that can happen, those digital payments really provide access to cash and capital, and being able to do things that you're looking to accomplish as a business when you get paid electronically.
Who has checks? Who still writes checks?
It's an excellent question. No, me either. I'm not even sure that if I have a 7-year-old, I'm not sure by the time he's old enough to really understand finances that he'll even know what a check is or that they exist. So, the hope is that we eventually get to a place where there's no more paper.
So, Evan, you're the VP of vendor sales. Talk to me about your team and how you're leading your team. And one of the big things that we talked about was leadership and the importance of it. And so, one of the things we always see is people don't, they don't leave companies; they leave people who manage them and who lead them. And so, talk to me a little bit about your journey and your understanding of leadership and how that has changed over 9 years. And you've been under leaders. I'm wondering, good, bad ones through your course of life. I'm sure we all have, but talk to me a little bit about how leadership has changed and what it looks like now for you managing your team.
Yeah, great question. I'm extremely passionate about leadership. I really think that it's a privilege, and I'm extremely grateful that I have an opportunity to lead a team of people. I'm responsible for 10 individuals today, so I've got a very small subset of the entire vendor sales org. And I'm also fortunate that we kind of grew up together. We've got some serious tenure on the team. I think we're probably averaging somewhere around about 6 years or so at Bottomline. So it's been a lot of fun to just see how all of us have grown up as the company has grown. But my biggest thing is that it's not a one size fits all approach. You really have to understand each individual, what makes them tick, what they're motivated by, and that's really where I get my greatest passion. Seeing the smiles on faces as they push themselves outside of their comfort zone, trying something new, and of course, closing that deal. Uh, Sales is about numbers. We all know that. That's obvious. But behind every metric, there's a person, and getting to know what makes that person tick and how they operate and what's important to them, both personally and professionally, is something that is a big passion of mine. And that's just sort of refined and gotten better over time. Being a high school guidance counselor doesn't hurt, right? Having had that experience and understanding what are the types of questions that you ask, how do you build those relationships, has really helped and benefited me. I'd say the biggest thing that I've become better at or more confident in is being kind and understanding that they're people, but also being able to manage holding folks accountable. That was not an easy thing for me at first. You want to be able to say, okay, like I'm likable. They want to work for me. You had mentioned it. People leave because of leadership, and I didn't want any of that to happen. But if you're not holding folks accountable, if you're not setting the expectations, their performance isn't going to be there, and they're going to walk out the door anyway because Evan didn't hold me accountable. He didn't help me get any better. He wasn't willing, to provide the coaching when it was needed. And so that's something that's really evolved for me as a skill and approach over the years.
Yeah, that's so good. I mean, kindness goes a long ways, right? And I think you said something that you're coaching them on a personal level, but also in their professional journey with you. And I think, Julie and I had the privilege of having a conversation with a leader just recently, Evan, and he was talking about really meeting their needs within an organization, meeting the employees' needs outside of their professional development. So understanding, I think, number one is what are their motivations, their personal motivations, but also their personal needs. What does that look like for you and scaling your team, and whether it's your subset team or the culture of Bottomline? What are some things that you guys do that really, kind of helps boost the individual to perform well because you're meeting their personal needs as well as their professional needs? What's the culture like?
Sure. It's something I'm extremely proud of, and the one thing that we, or I should we all put an emphasis on. It's not just one individual. Is that people can add to your culture. Just because you have an established one doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean that it's the ideal place to be, and that there are plenty of things for us to learn and grow and improve upon as we go. So one thing that Bottomline does that I think is great is we do quarterly surveys, right? So we're constantly reaching out to the employee base to say, how are we doing? How are we doing as a business? Not just in terms of, are we serving our customers and accomplishing our mission and working towards all of those business goals that we have, but how are we doing for you as individuals? Is this a place that you want to be and you want to work? So I think that's a really important step for any organization to take. It's just, what's the voice of the employee? How is everybody feeling? For me and my team specifically, and even the broader vendor sales team, we're all pretty like-minded in that we want to understand how people operate, what makes them tick. How do we get the most out of them by showing up for them on a daily basis? And so, from a culture perspective, we want to have fun. It's got to be fun. Sales is not an easy job. It can be extremely stressful. There's always anxiety. It's the end of something at any given point. The day, the week, the month, the quarter, there's always some sort of deadline that people are like, I got to get on pace. I'm trying to get to this specific number by this time. I'm going on PTO. You don't really ever stop. The best ones don't, right? They're always looking for that next deal. And so I really try to find a way to alleviate some of that stress as best as we can, whether it's a really well-timed GIF in a Teams chat, or pulling someone aside and just checking in and saying, hey, how are things going? Are you feeling okay? And so our culture is really set on making sure that we're all working towards our common business goals. But for me and our team, our little tight-knit unit, we're a team. Sales is a team sport. And so we're all going to work together and make sure that we're lifting each other up and putting, one another arm in arm to get to where we need to go. And it's not about, hey, look at this deal I just closed. I'm better than, or I'm at the top of the leaderboard. We all are competitive to an extent, and that's something that we want to do. But we're only as good as each other, and we only accomplish our goals and hit what we need to hit by doing it together. So that's really the big focus.
So, Evan, I would love to hear your thoughts on when you're developing leaders even under you, and you're developing. And you used to be a guidance counselor, so this might kind of go full circle here. What is the attribute that you feel like you need to coach up the most? That in order for someone who's wanting to become a leader, what do you think the attribute is? Like when you think about 9 years ago, what attribute was? I know you said in the building up. Even your own, but when you're talking to people now and you're having those one-on-ones, what does that look like? What is this? Is there one that sticks out? I know everyone's individual, but is there one that you're like, man, everyone needs to be coached up in this. They need a little bit more of this. And what does that look like in high school setting? Like, what is it that we're naive about everything? Probably, but that you think is a good skill set to have at that age range?
It's listening. You have to be engaged. You have to be paying attention, and it's so much easier said than done. I think we all know that. And it's a skill that you need as an individual sales rep as well, right? Like you have to be in tune with what your prospect or your client is saying to you, the questions that they're asking, the way that they're asking those questions. It's really easy to be distracted by the 9 million things that you have going on. You might be thinking about the next one-on-one. You might be thinking about that number that you have to go hit and you're pacing behind. And I owe this presentation to my boss and I got to go get that ready and I'm about to miss that deadline or what have you. And all of a sudden you've missed the last 60 seconds of someone filling you in on something that they have going on. So really being present in the moment and just listening to what people are saying is a skill that I think everybody needs and can always improve on, myself included. It's just human nature to be distracted by things and stressors and items that you have going on. And so really being able to understand and recognize that in yourself and then finding ways to say, okay, how do I pull myself back into the conversation? How do I make sure that I am being present in these moments? And for me, that one-on-one time when you're going into those coaching sessions, that I do it before you're even in there, in that room or on the virtual call, right? I'm not going to be distracted by anything. I'm putting aside whatever I need to put aside. This is their time to come in and show up, and they're expecting me to be present and to be able to support them. And so for any person learning to be a leader, first time leader, or who has interest in going into leadership, that's my first thing. Can you be engaged? Can you be actively listening and paying attention and in the moment? The rest will take care of it itself.
Yeah, listening. we all we all need that, right? At different levels, and I think sometimes even in leadership, like we need to be listening to a team. The fact that you said you guys do the surveys, and hearing feedback from your team, I think is so valuable. I want to touch on a topic of wellness a little bit because you mentioned the sales environment. As a previous salesperson myself, and the sales lead of a team, the environment, the stress. I remember, Evan, there were times where I had just had a big win and my boss is already asking me about like the next deal I'm going to close. And I'm like, can we just pause for a moment and celebrate this, please? And so it's so true. Like you said, the culture of sales sometimes it's just constant, right? So how do you balance all that? How do you keep your team balanced? Now, I know you said you like to have fun, you like to celebrate, but how do you leverage like wellness being part of that? Because as individuals, when COVID happened a few years back, it's just like there's anxiety, there's stress, and we're trying to keep up with everything. How do you guys as a team or as an organization, how do you manage that so you can still be driving those measurable results, but how do you manage that within the leadership team, but also with your employees?
Um, it can be as simple as taking the moment to pause and just celebrate the win and remembering to focus on the hard work that went into getting that. It can be a team dinner where we all go out and celebrate together and can unwind and have those moments as well. But for me, again, it comes back to understanding each individual and what's important to them and what they need in those moments. Some people want you to be the leader that says, okay, what's the next deal? What are we getting after next? Like, how do we keep pushing the ball forward? Other people need that moment. And, I don't think people take enough PTO, frankly. And so I'm a big proponent of that. Like, hey, you've worked really hard. That's the beauty of being in sales, right? If you're ahead of schedule or you've achieved your goal, I'll encourage someone to bag out early on a Friday afternoon. I've got people on my team that love to golf. If it's a beautiful day here in New England, late in the summer, go get started on the tee time early. We've got plenty of people that surf. You want to go hit the beach before the crowds get out of hand, or if you're taking off early, sometimes it's those little things like that that allow people to understand that you've got their back and you know that they've put in the hard work. And you can take that breath and say, okay, like, Evan understands that this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm hoping to have. Being able to do those kinds of things is something that is afforded by the hard work that those individuals are putting in. And so if I can reciprocate that in some way, whether again that's a pat on the back or just words of affirmation, or again cutting them loose early to get a head start on the weekend, knowing when it's time to do that and recognize that in people who may not see that they need that themselves, is really important to me and how I ensure that we can accomplish sort of the wellness of the culture, making sure that you're not getting that burnout happening, because they themselves have put pressure to say, okay, what's the next deal? Even though I might not be saying that or asking that, or somebody else on the sales floor might not be saying that or asking that. They're the ones going, man, I really need that next one. I'm not even stopping to take a moment to celebrate the win, slowing them down to
Mm,
help them do that is
That's
really important.
That's so good. So for those that are looking for more tea time and for surf time, they need to hit you up on LinkedIn, right, Evan?
That's right.
That's where
Exactly
your team
right.
at bottom line.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now you won't I'm a good boogie boarder. I know nothing about surfing, so that's about my skill extent. I will go hit the links if you want to. So if you're interested in a round of golf, let me know.
So, Evan, it seems like Bottomline has a really healthy culture in the way you cultivate your employees. But in your networks, or even just people it could be personally moving in and out of jobs and stuff. What are companies getting wrong in the area of leadership? Like, why? What are you hearing, and what are you seeing that's happening that's just really detrimental to a company's culture?
I think it again to tie it to sales because that's been my experience. Assuming that your top performer is going to be your best leader is a poor assumption. That's not always how it works out. Sometimes, and this was true for me. I was successful as an individual contributor, but I was never the person at the top of the leaderboard every single month. It wasn't my strength to just be the person that was 150% to quota and crushing everything. And wow, look at Evan go. But that's because I really relished the opportunity to help others. I wanted to understand how does this one person have success where I'm having success in another area, and to slow those things down and sort of highlight that critical thinking and that creativity, and understanding that it takes a very special individual to be a strong leader. And I think there are some pretty clear signs as to who will be successful in that kind of role. Can you be empathetic? Are you an active listener? And there are ways to suss that out through obviously the interview process, or chatting with people and having those conversations. And I'm extremely fortunate that our recruiting team, the folks that I work with on a regular basis, are so good at knowing exactly what we're looking for and the type of person that we want to work with and hire. That they do a really great job of making sure that when we're talking to people or interviewing folks for that kind of role, that they really hit on the key components that we're looking for. You have to have passion. You have to be, empathic. You have to be creative. You got to be able to problem solve. And most importantly, you have to be able to deliver on all of those things. And so it's not an easy thing to identify, but those are some of the areas that we're looking for when we're thinking about who's going to make a successful leader.
I think we get to talk with a lot of leaders, and we talk a lot about culture on this on this Elements of Culture podcast. But I think sometimes the cultural things is actually implemented at the very beginning from the recruiting standpoint. So, what are the types of talent and individuals that you're looking for that you see doing well in their role, not just even as individual contributors, but also moving into, their own maybe level of leadership that they might be striving for? What are some of those qualities that you guys are looking for?
Um, it's funny. We've talked a little bit about my experience as a guidance counselor. At the time, there was still a very heavy emphasis on you have to go to school, you got to go do 4 years of college, you have to have a great GPA. People want to see that, where you're going. If I can be honest, I'm not always double checking transcripts or asking for schools to send me what they did, right? And so for me, it's much more. I need to get in front of you. Can I have a conversation with you? Are you engaged with me? Are you asking thought provoking questions? If I make a statement to you in an interview process, does your answer align with that statement or that question? Or did you, take it out of left field and go down a completely different path? And so, when we're looking at just in general looking for the right candidate, those are some of the things that stand out to me. But when I think about top performers, and some of the attributes that they have, and some of the things that would stand out to me is, hey, maybe someday this person will make a great leader. It's consistency, it's hustle and hard work. Those things can't be taught, or you can't have a shortcut with that. Like there is no shortcut to success. The secret, anytime someone asks me what makes your top performer so successful, the secret is there is no secret. They just show up, they work hard, they're willing to put in the work and the effort. It's progress over perfection, right? They know it's not going to be perfect every single time. Even some of our best performers will have a call or two where they go, man, I didn't do great there. I wish I could get that one back, or a do over on that one. They really stick to their fundamentals. And on top of all of that, when you see them put their arm around somebody else, when we're in a team meeting and they're raising their hand on their own. I was the annoying person when I was an individual contributor that was always the one extending the meeting with an extra question, or what about this, or I had something to share, right? And some people really enjoy that because they're like, hey, I don't have to raise my hand or say anything. Someone else is going to take care. So those are the things that I'm looking out for. Are they comfortable in front of an audience speaking up and saying things and aren't afraid that, hey, if I say something wrong, no big deal, right? Well, we can learn from that. That's how you grow. And so when I'm looking for potential leaders, that's really what I'm looking for. Who are those people that are stepping up and going above and beyond, sort of their role and responsibility to highlight how can I help others around me be successful?
Evan, have you seen the approach for leadership change as different generations have come into the workforce and how they, because I know when I was younger and I came into a corporate setting, it was very much the 80s, 90s corporate setting. I was always wearing a blazer and there was like stalking restrictions and there was just, there was some stuff there. And then, as the millennials came in, things shifted. And then we had, Gen X come in and things were shifting. And for someone like me, I think it's always shifting for the better because there's always a pushback in some area. But I noticed leadership styles changing. Do you see that in your area too? And what do we need to be doing to be good leaders for all the generations?
Great question. You definitely see a lot more tattoos and mohawks and blue hair these days, which I love. I think that's amazing that you get to have that personality shine through. I think in general, for the most part, a lot of corporate America has realized that there needs to be some personality, some flexibility when it comes to those kinds of things. It's what makes us human. And when you feel comfortable showing up in your own skin and who you can be, you're certainly going to produce, regardless of the role, right? So big believer in that. But yeah, it's not a bullpen anymore, right? There isn't just this sort of like beat the drum, show up, crush numbers, get to what you can get to, repeat, do it all over again. Personalities are different. And I'd say the one thing that I've seen as a shift in leadership, and I've been extremely fortunate to have some pretty great leaders in my experience here at Bottomline, that they all really understand that. That you have to think about the individuals differently. It doesn't mean that we're not holding people accountable. Again, it's not an excuse to all of a sudden just have it be rainbow and sunshine and everything is great and whatever you get is whatever you get. Like, we're still a business. You still have to drive revenue. You still have to hit your targets. But that's not the only focus. And so that's where I've seen it really shift, is that there's a much broader openness to, okay, let's think about these people. They are people. They're not a metric. How do we make sure that if we're going to be identifying these individuals, that we can bring them into an environment where we can do both of those things, where we can demand the best and to be your best and work hard and accomplish what we need you to accomplish, but also make it not feel like, man, I'm just a number at a company that isn't attributing to anything, that this is just a job and I'm just showing up to collect a paycheck, and then that you're much more than that. And in my experience, those leaders that I've come across are really good at doing both of those things.
That's so good, Evan. Thank you so much for joining us and just talking about really important discussion on leadership and what it means to lead well, what it means to listen, whether you're a leader or even an individual contributor. I think that, listening goes a long way, but also recognizing the fact that, yes, in sales, there's an engine, there's a process, there's a system, but at the same time, there's room for humanity. There's room for empathy. There's room to be seen and to speak up when we need to. And I think all those pieces really contribute to a healthier picture of what a corporate team can look like. And I think that's also what we're moving away from. Like Julie was saying, the stocking restrictions or the blazers. Maybe there's more room for the purple hair or whatever. But I think that the culture has changed, it's shifted, and it's allowing us to have more of these conversations to reflect on the reality of what healthy leadership and healthy culture looks like. So thank you so much for joining us today, Evan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. Thanks, Julie. It's been a pleasure. Again, it really is a privilege. I really enjoy the fact that I'm given the honor and the responsibility to lead a group of people, and I don't take it lightly. And that's, I guess, the parting wisdom that I'd leave to anybody listening or watching is to understand that that's not something that's just given. It's earned, and You got to show up for your people the way that they show up for you.
Absolutely. So good.
Thank you, Evan.
Thanks so much.